Hey, power people. Welcome to Renewable Rides, powered by VECKTA. I'm Gareth Evans, the CEO and founder.
And I'm Dan Roberts, head of sales. In each episode, we'll uncover the latest trends, learnings, challenges, and triumphs relating to the energy transition, on-site energy, and sustainability through the experiences of our inspiring guests and team here at VECKTA.
So get ready for an exhilarating adventure into the fast-paced world of challenging limits, adapting purposefully, and empowering co-creation to accelerate the energy transition with those that are on a mission to create a more resilient, profitable, sustainable, and thriving energy future. So let's go. All right, welcome everyone back to Renewable Rides. Today, I am extremely excited to have with us Dan, as always, and Bill Nussey. Bill is a legend, and you'll get to hear all about him throughout this podcast. Business leader, marketeer, podcaster, author, and today a venture capitalist, as well as someone who's leading the charge for, as he calls it, local energy. And you can see the book behind him that he's written, Freeing Energy. Definitely check it out. It's the Bible for our industry. But local energy is what we refer to as on-site energy here at VECKTA. And really excited to have you, Bill.
Hey, I'm excited to be here. I would have made you guys one of the key stories in my book had I known you when I was writing it. I love what you guys are doing. And as we said before we started, this is probably the only time I've been a podcast guest where I didn't have to say, but can we narrow the conversation down to on-site energy? So I love being here with you guys and love the mission you're on.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Cool. Well, we always start by exploring what you're passionate about. You know, I think a lot of people don't really get into this, and I think it leads our entire lives. So we'd love to hear, what are you passionate about, both professionally and personally?
I had this great opportunity about 6 years ago, and I'd run and exited lots of startups, and I took some time from the last one. I sold my company to IBM, and it became the IBM Marketing Cloud. And I took the time after we got that done to step back and say, you know, what can I do that will really make a difference? And I wasn't remotely ready to retire or to become a philanthropist, but I thought hard about it. And I tried to find something that would check three really big boxes for me personally. One was, what can I do to make the planet better for my children? I'm not a huge environmentalist, but I think that we are facing some very real and terrifying changes. And there's some simple things we can do now, some simple awarenesses. And what can I do about that? The second was that I had traveled around the world enough to know that living as an American or in Europe, just how unbelievably fortunate we are. And are there some things that I could put my time or money or energies towards that might help folks who have incredible potential, but don't get to realize it because they grew up without flowing water or all kinds of situations. And the third, because I'm a capitalist and I'm not totally proud of it, but I was like, where can you make billions of dollars? Not that I hope to make billions of dollars. And if I ever do, I'll probably give it all away. But like, I was looking for one thing that checked all those three boxes, and I found it. And that was clean energy. But I got into it like, I don't know, 6-9 months of writing this book, which is the one over here. And I became really despondent because I realized that this is one of the most regulated industries in the world. And so entrepreneurs struggle. Most of them focus on selling to utilities, and utilities are just difficult customers to sell to. They take a long time. They're very thoughtful and methodical, and they're highly regulated. And that's when I struck upon local energy. And so my mission became local energy, but it finally shifted towards helping other people get as excited about local energy as I am. And that's where the book came from, where the podcast came from, where the TED Talk came from, just spreading the word that this is an amazing business opportunity. Hey, if you think the planet's going to get colder in 100 years, if you think that fossil fuels are the greatest thing ever, you know what? I don't care for this mission, because if you want to be in an amazing business, something as exciting as, well, crypto used to be, or AI is now, or as marketing tech was in the past years, that is these clean energy, on-site energy, local energy. That's an incredibly exciting business. So my whole mission is to sit here and talk to, well, everyone but you, because you already get it, but talk about why this is such an exciting business. That is my mission.
That's great. I couldn't agree more. I'm excited to dig into that. with you in more detail. But how did you end up here? I think a lot of people either interested in this industry or thinking about local energy, on-site energy from a business leader perspective, they all think that you have to have studied it, been in the industry for decades. And as we know, the industry is really just getting going. Talk to us about your personal journey. What were the values you grew up with? Where did you grow up? How did you, what motivated you? What was your industry prior to kind of getting into what you do today?
I was really a unique kid. Wasn't very popular. If you gave me a ball and put me 10 feet from a wall, I probably couldn't throw it and hit it. And so, and in my generation, that was pretty damning.
Yes.
And somehow when I was in 7th grade, they installed a terminal, like a ka-chunk, 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 in the computer 110 baud modem terminal. And when everyone else is throwing balls during recess, I would go into the library. Believe me, I got a lot of crap for it socially. I was definitely not popular, but I went into the library and started typing into it. I gotta say, it was like the coolest thing I'd ever experienced in my life. And I realized that I had finally met something that I could be good at and I was passionate to do. And so I just started in computers really early. And back in high school and college, I started computer businesses at a very successful software business called Better Software, because there was very few names taken, and Better Software was a name you could actually copyright in the early 80s and late 70s. And we sold software on cassette tapes, and it was successful. And I learned one of the greatest lessons that set the course of my professional and personal life was if I had no sports capabilities, I wasn't very funny or good looking, but if I ran my own business, I could get dates. And and so I just realized it was something unique, and I was proud of it. And people, guys and girls, were just like, "Hey, I've never heard of anyone who's done that before. Tell me about your story." And then I had some confidence. My whole life changed. I fell in love with business. And so in college, I doubled down and I started a business, another software business that was selling software internationally. And we ended up growing that to selling the software package. It was a desktop email long before the internet. We sold it in 45 countries, translated it into like 13 languages. I did, I think, the 3rd software deal with the CEO of SoftBank now. He's pretty famous now. He wasn't that famous back then, out in Japan. And
wow.
Just fantastic experience for someone early in my career. And it was pretty unusual for someone in their 20s to be doing all that and having a great time with my friends and building that company. I think I've always had this notion, and I got lucky to be part of massive disruptions. And that's kind of what I was looking for when I sold my company to IBM, is like, what's the next coming disruption? And I think that clean energy is that disruption. And what that means to me is that you've got industries, especially the utility industry, but the entire power infrastructure industry has been fairly complacent for 100 years. I joke in the book that if you brought back the Wright brothers from 100 years ago, from 1920, and they came back to today, and you showed them an F-35 or a 747, they would be unbelievably thrilled with what their invention had wrought. And if you brought back Alexander Graham Bell and you showed him an iPhone, you can pick this device up and access on your hand the sum total of all human knowledge and instantaneously reach one of 8 billion people on the planet Earth within 5 seconds, he just said, wow, I can't believe that I was the beginning of that story. That's pretty cool. If you brought back Thomas Edison, Nikola Tesla, George Westinghouse, Sam Insull, any of these people that at the same time were doing something just as amazing in the 20s and 30s, and they would look at the electrical industry today and they'd say, I'm completely confused. You're still running coal plants over 60 hertz AC lines run through the air. This is the exact same technology we did 100 years ago. What have you been doing? And how come the telephone guys and the airplane guys have taken off? And so I think that, I was looking for a disruption, and boy, that was one. It's not an easy one. It's one that's going to be resisted and fought and slowed, but all worthy disruptions are. And so that's really my story. I was looking for it. And the cool thing about this industry, particularly the local energy side, is that it's all entrepreneurs. If you wanted to start if you wanted to get in the business of making power plants, or as many of my friends are trying to do, to make nuclear plants, right? That is a very tough business. We can put the economics and the safety issues aside. but just say the fact that when you have to spend $1 billion to make a thing, it's just long and hard, right? And so that's where I think my mission intersects with your answer to your question, is that entrepreneurs can get into local energy. They can get into onsite energy like you guys. And I think that's what's so unique about it, that it's accessible to everybody. And the really cool thing is when you show up at an event at the industry or a meetup or online, I mean, everybody, it's part of an early community. Everybody wants to be friends. It's not like trying to get into the software industry where you're an insider or you're not. This is a welcoming community. And people aren't saying, hey, you haven't, well, some people do, but very few people will say, hey, you hadn't been here for 20 years. So we're not, you don't really know how it works. When it comes to this onsite energy stuff, it is a brand new industry. Welcome aboard. Everybody should join us.
That's great. And in terms of that, like entrepreneurial journey, Bill, what are the kind of standout stories or lessons learned that you've experienced? You touched on their patience, grit, having a mission. How close did you come to losing it all or having a failure? And what are the skills that you've seen and sort of double down on to ensure that your businesses would become as successful as they were?
Most of my businesses faced near death. And I think that the answer to how to turn those into successes boils down to a simple idea. I'm too stupid to give up. And I think it's a degree of tenacity that's, it's not born out of courage. It's not born out of the fierceness of vision that I'm positive I'm right. It's the, holy cow, what else am I going to do? I'm going to look like a real idiot if this doesn't work. And gosh, I spent the last 5 years working on this. There's got to be something I can pull out of this. And the irony of that, it's not just a matter of surviving it, but some of the darkest times in my career history, including writing the Free Energy book, where I thought I had wasted thrown down the toilet 2 years of my career, in that despondency, in that, what have I done, head in hand, family like, whoa, this isn't going the way it needs to, friends saying, what a bozo, get out now. Oftentimes in that dark period, the best ideas are born. And that's what happened with Silverpop, where the company I sold to IBM, it was heading into a super competitive market. We had been around a little while. Competitors, brand new, Silicon Valley, were raising hundreds of millions of dollars and frankly pulling ahead of us. And then we got hacked. And we were the second company in the United States, so long ago, before everyone's hearing about someone getting hacked every third day and getting a letter in the mail from their credit card company or state agency saying your information was stolen by hackers. We were the second company in the entire world to announce getting hacked. The first was Google.
Wow.
And so no one had ever heard of it. And I'm not sure we were the second company to actually get hacked. We were the second ones to own up to it. And it was a hellstorm like nothing I've ever experienced in my career. There were late night comedians making jokes nationally about my company. And we didn't think we were going to survive. And I didn't think I'd survive in my job. But in that dark period, we came out of it and we were bolder, and we had some ideas that now that, like a cancer survivor or someone who maybe gets in a car wreck but magically walks away, you kind of think about things differently, and it gives you a certain freedom to say, well, what if I really did this thing I did want to do before, but just didn't seem like it? Yeah, you have a certain freedom and a boldness. And from that, at Silverpop, we launched an entirely new technology base, which was the primary reason that IBM acquired us. We had done something around relationship marketing we called behavioral marketing, that which there are books written on now, that would never. It wasn't a new idea, but no one had ever tried to commercialize it at scale. And it was coming out of that hacking incident and surviving it, that basically just the sheer, what the heck, if we lived through that, let's just go do that. So I would say, and similar with the book and similar with startups earlier than Silverpop, the tough times are what really turn the grit up and make you get incredibly creative and embrace risks that you might not otherwise embrace.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely love it.
Yeah, super interesting. One thing I'm curious about, you're, as a self-described capitalist, I'm a firm believer that businesses are the biggest catalyst for change. So I'm curious, as we're entering this inflection point of distributed energy and on-site energy, in the time that you spent with the book and your podcast and speaking with others out there, can you share a little bit with our listeners of how businesses can get out from underneath the utilities and adopt this new paradigm and really impact change in that way?
I probably get an email a week from a person who says, I want to put solar on my house and go off grid. And you guys laugh and your listeners will laugh because they know that is not a good idea. There's an incredibly important role the utilities play. I think they could play a more important and more vital role than they do today. And they resist the change. But people who have the romantic idea of local energy, of on-site energy, they think that frees them from the utilities. And my perspective is that while utilities can be difficult and recalcitrant, they are, in my view, a permanent part of the future of electricity. They play a vital, vital role. I really wish if I was the king of the world, I would change the role they play. They'd actually be more profitable. If they'd listen to me, they'd be more profitable. They'd be happier. Yeah. They'd be more innovative. But so far, they're not listening to me. But I think the great thing about on-site energy that nobody gets is that by and large it's cheaper. Mm-hmm. And so it's not always cheaper, but it is going to be cheaper in a place like California. And the higher degrees of resiliency you want to build, it gets closer to break even and sometimes can even be a bit more expensive. But generally speaking, it is unbelievably affordable. And that is something that nobody understands. And that's part of the reason I wrote my book, was to get the message out there that not only is this disruptive technology of generating energy locally less expensive, its price is plummeting at a rate that's only been seen in semiconductors. And there's all these statistics in my book, but when people sort of scoff at my point, I cite widely known and undisputed statistics that you can find in 50 different places that say basically, if you put up let's just talk about solar alone for a moment. If you put up a solar on a building or a home in the United States, you're going to pay roughly $3 a kilowatt. And I'm sure everyone who listens knows what that means, but a lot of people don't know what that means. If you take the exact same solar panels from the same manufacturer, same model numbers, the same inverters, and you send them instead to Australia, and you put them on, and you hire people to put that on the roof in Australia, Australians are going to pay about $1.10 in US dollars. And I just let that hang out there for a little while, because people are like, I don't understand. If you're paying someone to go on the roof and you're buying the same equipment, how come it's so much cheaper in Australia? How come Japan is cheaper? How come everywhere it's cheaper? Do they have different solar cells? They have much more sun. They must have more sun in Australia. So actually, this is just to build the project, not how profitable it is, but just to build the project. Doesn't matter. It could be, it could be Seattle or it could be Australia. Same. The prices are irrelevant to the sun. And I let it hang out there for a minute, and it's like, so what's the difference, Bill? And I say, it's the soft costs. It is all the ridiculous amount of overhead to figure out how to design the system, to shop the various vendors, many of whom are small, unsophisticated providers. I tell people, think about your solar installer, the industry. Hopefully you can do better, but the solar installer industry is a lot like your HVAC industry, a lot of local mom and pop pest control industry, some national chains, but generally local franchises who are in it because it's a good job, not because they're super sophisticated business people that are likely to be the next Elon Musk. Thank God they do the work, though, because it works. But it's not this, despite solar and batteries being the sophisticated technology that many of the people implementing across the United States, particularly for residential, but for businesses too, are just not sophisticated. So you spend all this time finding those people, vetting those people, getting the designs. Then you start the even harder part of, well, I've got I had a solar company recommend something for my roof, and I had another one recommend it as well so I could get them to bid against each other. And one of them said, in Cobb County, the solar panel has to be at least 9 inches from the crest of the roof. I bet you the other guys didn't tell you that. And they showed me the place in the Cobb County rules where that's the case. Like, wow. And then when I got the system installed, the power company had to come out and check it all out. And then they turned it on. Then the power company had to come back out again to adjust the meter, because somehow that's how they adjust the payment rates. I don't know. And so the power company had to come out 3 times. And the funny part about the power company, and we have a good power company, but the funny thing is that they say, I'll be there in the morning. And so the head of projects of this solar installer sat on my driveway in a pickup truck. I said, come on and have some coffee. He said, no, I'm going to be here the moment this guy shows up. He was sat on my driveway for 4 hours twice, not installing things, not speccing business, probably just doing his email and reading things. And so this ridiculous degree of inefficiency is baked into the American installation system. The permitting, the regulatory system, the fact that the expertise is very diffuse. So when I wrote the book, the big thing I talked about, man, was like, how do you get rid of these, what are called soft costs? How do you cut right through this to get to quick answers by experts, apples to apples comparisons, and then credible buyers, credible builders to put this together? And no one in the US had ever done that until I met you guys. So there's some others that are kind of in that space with you guys, but you guys do some unique things that I haven't seen done before. And that's why I'm so excited about your business and excited to work with you.
It's crazy though, isn't it, Bill? And we couldn't agree more. I think NREL did a study and they say up to 70% of project costs today are sales, marketing, pre-consulting, engineering, design, procurement contracts. The list goes on and on. Yeah, we need to get that capital going into hardware.
In Australia, when you get your system, your residential system installed, you just basically, as I understand it, you just go, the installer takes their iPhone, they take a picture with it, they send it over to somebody in the government, somebody in the government looks at it, says, did you use the following sort of big list of equipment? Is it some subset of that? And they're like, yep, show me the picture. Okay, good. And then the power company turns on.
Yeah.
So it took me a month between when the project was finished and electricity was flowing. It's a matter of minutes. And there's no reason for it. And the good news is the U.S. government is, in the previous administration and the current administration, they're all trying to solve that. It's not a political thing. That's the other great thing about onsite energy is it doesn't get politicized like the big projects, the big wind turbines there in your background there, and the giant solar arrays. That gets politicized. But the small stuff, man, the single highest concentration of solar in the United States is in Arizona, and it happens to be one of the reddest political regions in the United States. So this part of it is not political, which is another great reason. That's another thing I want to tell people. Wherever you fall, whoever you vote for, wherever you live, everybody loves onsite energy. It brings people together rather than divides them, which is just another long list of why I love the space you're in. Well,
especially I think everybody, and if we're isolating it just here to the US, but I think most people can get behind energy independence or energy sovereignty. And to your point, where we're no longer relying on a single source, we can control it ourselves, we can generate it ourselves. So that really resonates.
It's got a real romantic appeal to generate to take care of myself. And right now, even though it's a little bit cloudy, my house batteries are discharging to pay for this video feed and run my computers. But it was sunny when I came home to do this, and the solar panels had charged it. And so the vast majority of my electricity is generated here in my house. And on the rare occasions my utility blinks, my house continues to run just fine. But overall, my electricity bills are probably half or less of what they used to be.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so you're obviously passionate about local energy, as you call it, on-site energy. What's exciting you most in the space as you look across the landscape today?
The capitalist in me is most excited about what's going to happen in the next 2 years as American business, American finance starts to understand what the Inflation Reduction Act means.
Yeah.
I'm talking about a poorly named bill or law, but it was necessary to get it passed, which is sad. Because the majority of the economic benefit is going to accrue to people who live in states who actually would have voted against it because they thought it was political. And which is just, it's sad because there's going to be incredible job creation from this. And the thing that I always the reason I'm so excited about the IRA is that it isn't, despite what you read in the headlines, it isn't about a giant handout from the government. The government does a lot of giant handouts. This is like the Rural Electrification Act back in the 30s, 1935, which I credit to being one of the biggest reasons the United States pulled ahead industrially and societally across all the world. Even though Europe had centuries on them, the United States pulled together as an economic powerhouse because we were the first country in the world to fully electrify all of our citizens, as I understand it. And so I think it wasn't the government doing handouts to create power lines into rural America. It was loans that all paid back wonderfully and some well-sculpted laws. And that unleashed the entire economic potential of rural America, which had been largely agricultural previously. And when they were just remaining doing agriculture, they could do it far more efficiently because of electrification. They could process locally rather than pay all the money to have it, trucked somewhere else. There's just a lot of things that changed. And IRA is doing the same thing. It's not a government handout at all. It's just basically creating incentives. So if you decide to build a solar battery generator system or a hydrogen electrolysis system, you're going to pay a little less in taxes, right? That's the big news. So it makes building these projects for investors, the return's a little better, a lot better, because investors care about 1 or 2 percentage points, and this makes all the difference. And there are a few cases where the government's writing checks, but by and large, if you don't build that hydrogen power plant or you don't build that solar battery factory or installation, the government's not giving any money.
Yep.
And so the vast majority of the money that the government's going to give out is a loan. And the government's been doing that since President Bush put together the Loan Program Office, Republican president. And that loan program has actually paid back. It's one of the best returns the government's had. It was a net positive to American taxpayers. And so I'm on my soapbox here, guys, and I apologize, but I just this is like the best story that no one gets, right? Yeah. It's like penicillin. It's like, you know what? You could have all these issues, but we've invented this thing. We've discovered this thing called penicillin. Well, I don't know about penicillin. Maybe it's this. I don't know what's going to happen. Well, it could cure all these problems if you just give it a try. And that's why onsite energy is so exciting, because it is truly a better mousetrap. And we just have to get the word out.
Yeah. Well, one thing I'd be curious to add on to that. So there's all the incentives, but then we're starting to see the massive growth of different I'll call them programs within the utilities or within the ISOs, the grid ISOs around demand response. And to participate in those, oftentimes you need to have, or to participate and maintain business operations, you need to have on-site energy. Maybe you can comment on that a little bit.
Back 20, 30 years ago, we all heard the notion of a smart grid. And that's kind of like flying cars. And there's a story in my, you can kind of make them if you want, and you've probably seen some videos, and it'd be really cool if it worked, and maybe it'll happen one day. But the smart grid is, the smart grid is one of those things where if you got all the government institutions and all the private industry and all the capitalists and finance to agree on 1 or 2 standards, then you could actually make the smart grid work. My favorite metaphor for the grid is the internet, right? IBM and all these companies had all these grid topologies, these network topologies. And it wasn't until a bunch of academics came up with this completely decentralized topology that had a bare minimum of standards required that the internet took off. And the key thing, and this is in my book as well, that people missed about why the internet worked and why decentralized energy is going to work, is that the brains of the system are at the edge. Yeah. This is a huge shift in thinking, because when you talk about the smart grid, they're imagining the utilities putting all these mainframe computers and smart AI systems to do all this stuff. And there may be a future for that. We need the grid to be smarter for sure. But the reason the internet worked was that they quit trying to make a centralized thing where it was controlled from the top down. They said, let's just make the participants smart. And so demand response, virtual power plants, peak shaving, these are all incredibly high value things that make money for the utility and for the business, residential and building owners. It's 1 + 1 = 11. But it works because it's the building is smart, not the grid. And if you have a smart building, the grid can be dumb as a brick, and it's going to still save everybody money and make money for the building owners. So that's what's so exciting to me, is that once you assume that you're going to have a smart electrical system in your house or in your building or in your campus, then all these things that we might wait another 50 years for the utilities and government to figure out how to do become possible overnight. And again, it's an awareness thing. So that's what I love about what you guys are doing, is you're making it easier than ever to make us not a smart grid, but a smart building, a smart home, a smart campus. And that smart can, by being smart compared to a dumb grid, it can make the grid better. It can be the brains of the grid without the grid having to be smart. Lots of money there.
You touched on awareness right at the end there, Bill. There's obviously a huge amount of opportunity in this space, and you've described the fact that these systems are ultimately create more profitable outcomes, as well as more sustainable and resilient outcomes for businesses. Why do you not see more businesses doing it? Is it an awareness issue, or what are the limiting factors do you see?
Well, my major advice is to start a podcast. And I think that if we can get enough podcasts out there, it's true, actually, podcasts work. It's really an awareness thing.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of history of better technologies living in the darkness because there just wasn't awareness to them. And in this case, the case of distributed energy, there's a lot of resistance to the idea of taking off. And so I think that I'm not going to go so far to say that there's these nefarious forces at work that are causing it to be disrupted and misinformation. I wouldn't go that far in public to say that things like that might happen. But suffice it to say that there is a great deal of misinformation. Perhaps some of it, all of it, is well-intentioned. I don't know. But just ignore the $60 million bribery scream in Ohio for a moment. But so I think that most people assume that it's going to be complicated. It's going to cost money. I sat down with schools are a great place to put onsite energy. It's a win-win, and plus it gives students a chance to see the future and see viscerally how their energy works. And I sat down with the head of a principal of a school, and I was actually offering to help fund the system. And I said, well, you're kind of resisting putting this solar battery system in place, and you're paying a really high premium for electricity right now. And this would, we've got 2 reports here from 2 different vendors that show your electricity price will go down. So I'm a little confused. Like, why don't you want to put this up? And his answer was the answer to the question you're asking, Gareth, was, why isn't this happening sooner? And he said, I assume I'm missing something. I know you're an advocate. He said, I assume there's something you're not telling me. Not that you're doing it unintentionally, but you're clearly an advocate. You've got something, you want to see this happen. And I don't know what it means to put solar on my roof. I don't know. Is it going to leak? Is it going to fall in and kill my kids? I have no idea. What if it breaks? Who am I going to have to call? These are things I just don't have to worry about. And I call my utility. Maybe I'm paying them more than I need to, but it just works. It's worked for my father, my father's father, and 15 generations before me. So I'm just not going to worry about it. I got a lot of other things to worry about. And that's really what I discovered. And as I pondered it, somewhat depressed, that I realized we are in most places, we are at price parity. It's plus or minus the same cost of getting grid electricity enough that it's like, okay, if I don't really know about this, I'm not going to worry about it. But everyone sees what's happening with electric cars right now. Once you figure out that this actually works, that all the naysayers and the stuff you read online isn't actually going to be as bad as you say, I'm not going to have my $60,000 car stranded on the side of the road and, never to be used again because it somehow can't get charged. Those things can be resolved. It's being resolved all the time. You have friends that did it. Then all of a sudden, this cloud overhanging our industry will start to evaporate, just like we're seeing for electric vehicles. And the cool thing is, and this is one of my favorite parts about the reason I love the tech space and the reason I love your space and everything here. If you'd gone and asked McKinsey or Bain or the smartest government think tank 20 years ago, and you were to say, tell me when and why electric cars will take off.
Yeah.
Nobody would have predicted that every major car manufacturer in 2023 was betting everything on electric cars, everything. And, I worked at McKinsey. I know what it's like to try to do economics to map the future and things like that. what happened was a dude named Elon Musk and some other people before him ultimately created a product that single-handedly captured the imagination, made people realize, got the early adopters, and changed the world. We could have a debate for 5 days on the pros and cons of Elon Musk, because he has a lot on both sides of the ledger. But it's indisputable that he is the Thomas Edison of our day in this regard. Yeah. He's doing something no one thought was possible. He has created an industry from scratch in the same way Steve Jobs did for online music and others. But this is a much more fundamental change. And what happens is we're going to have a couple of entrepreneurs, maybe you guys, who are going to play this wedge role to cause people to wake up, look around and say, wait a minute, this is actually viable. This does actually make sense. Let me be one of the first people to give it a try. And that's why I'm so happy you're doing this podcast and all the other things you're doing, because the message, you just need a couple of people. And then they're going to tell a couple of people, and you're pioneering this part of the space could change the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One of the things you said within there on the electric car analogy to the onsite energy space is they see people that they know, or they see their friends adopting them. So one of the things that I think is helpful in all of this is to hear some success stories. So maybe you can share one or two stories of companies or organizations that have deployed microgrids and the benefits they've received from them.
When I was writing the book, I hired an expert editor to give me some advice. And she told me once I finished the first draft that my best story was buried in the middle of the book. And she said, if you want to capture people's imagination, start with a story about Puerto Rico. And so that became the first part of the book. And I think that's probably the best answer to your question, because shall we call it the from to story of Puerto Rico, one of the world's worst grids, not just, the United States, unequivocally the worst grid, but even for countries that have far less wealth than the United States, Puerto Rico's grid is just a mess. And Hurricane Maria came through, and as many people know, Puerto Ricans had no electricity for as long as 9 months. It was devastating. The scars of that can still be seen today when you visit the island. But the governor, who was not a particularly electric guy or anything like that, but when they were sort of 3 or 4 weeks into the complete blackout across the entire island, and their ports were so busy because of the damage, they couldn't even ship generators and gasoline in, and people were dying in the streets. And hospitals. One guy interviewed who his father had been on life support, and the hospital ran out of diesel fuel, and the father passed away. And so just story after story after story, the governor said, listen, we're going to let anyone connect solar and battery to the grid without having to go through a process. And never in the world had it ever happened before. Arguably, electrical engineers, probably dangerous, but he was right. It was fine. And so 10,000 solar microgrids got built in the year after Maria. And each story confirms the value of those systems. And the one that I talked about in the book was a school in the mountains that regularly lost electricity. And we take the quality and affordability of electricity for granted in the mainland U.S., even in places like California, where stability and cost are definitely not impressive. But they would, because it was a rural, low-income area, it was mostly the children. The lunch was their meal, and so. But when the electricity went out, which happened all the time, even unrelated to hurricanes or bad weather, they had to shut the school down and send everybody home. And the repercussions to the community were terrible, because the parents, usually two working parents, barely getting along, barely covering the bills, and someone have to come home and take care of the children. And so working with Rocky Mountain Institute, they put up a solar microgrid it wasn't a giant one. It was about $200,000, solar batteries, inverters, but it kept the base load of the school running 24/7. It kept the refrigerators running. It kept the the computers and the network running. It kept the lights on in the places where it could be dangerous without lights, like maybe a long hallway or something. And so, and the one part that really blew me away, very unique to that area, was that toilets didn't work because it's the mountainous areas, and so they had to have a pump to move the waste from the toilets. So there was literally no working toilets when there wasn't electricity. So for all these reasons, the school shut down many times a year, and the repercussions were substantial economically and developmentally for the kids. And those were multiplied by hundreds after Maria. Now they have a solar microgrid. The school always operates. The kids always go to school. And on those occasions, like 9 months after they built it, there was a giant earthquake. The community rallied to the school to come get their phones and laptops charged so they could stay online. And that, to me, that's an extreme example. It doesn't apply to the average American corporation, but bits of that story apply everywhere. The cost of being offline, the cost of not being able to run your factory, to not having lights running, your computer network being shut down, and the fact that if you install a solar microgrid with some resilient backup, you can actually lower your costs. That combination, and also if you have sustainability goals, you're actually going to make major movement, not just buying carbon credits and pushing the problem to somebody else for money, but actually spending less money to produce less carbon. Again, I like to make people, I love the carbon market. I think it's really an important transition, but you're paying more money so someone else can solve the problem that you should solve. On-site energy, you're paying less money than you did before, and you're solving the problem yourself. So again, I think that's those are examples, but Puerto Rico is my favorite one for how it can fundamentally change a community, not just save money. It's just a wonderful story.
I wasn't sure if we were going to get here in the conversation, but you touched on the carbon offsets and the RECs piece. And one of the things that we talk about is enterprise value. So maybe you can touch a little bit on how solving the problem yourself through distributed on-site local energy, the enterprise value that brings versus RECs or offsets and those other mechanisms.
A metaphor that I think resonates with people on that question, Dan. If you put solar on a home, according to Zillow, the value of your resale goes up about $15,000 to $20,000. Essentially, you're probably going to get back the price of what you paid to build the solar 10 years later when you sell the house. Not to mention all the incredible savings along the way. And that's just a simple way to think about it. It's like putting in granite countertops or really nice landscaping or a pool. You're adding to the value of your facilities that has got tangible, real value to the next owners. And in the case of an enterprise, those owners are shareholders. And so you're actually increasing your asset value in every measurable way by installing on-site energy. And then and you immediately get the savings, or at least the break even and the benefit of the sustainability goals. But then the asset of your building or facilities is higher if you ever want to sell it. And that is recognized. That's the whole, complex modern accounting. That value is recognized over the lifetime of the system. So it's an immediate benefit to shareholders because you've actually got an asset that's worth more in every way.
Versus the alternate option, which I'd dub as being climate extortion, where you play increasing costs for your energy through the utility, as well as then trying to pay to buy credits. So now you're getting hit with a double whammy. Super interesting.
I'm glad both paths exist, but I think that we wouldn't be making the progress we are towards clean energy, towards a net zero future. We're going way too slow. But the progress, a lot of it's being made because the offset market sort of works. And I think there's folks out there doing a really good job. But that is a Band-Aid, right? You're going to have to write that offset check every year. You're going to have to deal with, as a friend of mine who works at a large enterprise, runs sustainability, and he's dealing with the fact that he's being called out by his shareholders because they're saying the green credits you bought are actually valid. You just don't have any of that with on-site energy. But like the principal of the school, you can't just write a check. You actually can just write a check, but these business owners, these building owners don't know that that's literally all they've got to do. So if only, guys, if only there was a company that actually explained all these things, allowed you to put it in dollars and cents, measure your carbon impact. But then there's lots of companies that do that, but then actually trustably help you find the way to build it, design it properly, and then help it get built. If there's someone like that, I would invest in them. I would want to be on their podcast. I would want to be, part of their community and part of their journey.
You're too kind. We like to ask Bill about if you could be any energy technology, what would you be? And you've touched on a few in this podcast. What's the standout one?
I have my own podcast, also called Free Energy, and I am referred to quite commonly there as Battery Bill.
Nice.
So when I was in high school, I wrote down on a piece of paper, the best way to become a billionaire is to invent a better battery. And I've always felt, and I love watching the battery technologies evolve and get cheaper and more inventive, like Form Energy using iron for long duration, low cycle batteries. The fact that the whole car industry is shifting from NMC, NMA, traditional lithium ion chemistries to LFP. The innovation in batteries, and this is something nobody understands. It's like, so if we run out of this chemical, we'll get it over here. And if lithium gets too expensive, or we don't want to buy nickel or cobalt because cobalt's in a disputed area, but just do something else. And you can't do that with any other technology. But with batteries, if whatever you're doing now doesn't work, it's not cheap enough, just do another. There's like 1,000 ways to make batteries, and that's why I think batteries. That's why I am Battery Bill.
Love it. That's awesome. Any favorite quotes, Bill, or any quotes that sort of really drive you or motivate you?
There is one. I was thinking about it today for our podcast with you, and I think it's for those of us that see the future with some optimism and also some frustration, because why don't people get this? There's a quote that was on the lobby wall. It was a large blank wall of my last company. It was the only thing on the wall. It was a quote by one of the people who invented the Apple computer, Alan Kay. And it said, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. And no one would have predicted electric cars would be where they are, but a group of people, including Elon Musk, invented it. And they made the future was entirely because of the vision of these people, the stamina, the grit, this too stupid to give up. And that's why I am so privileged to be in a business where I get to work with amazing entrepreneurs that are too stupid to give up. Hopefully they don't even have to worry about it that hard. They just sail right to big success. But like Elon Musk, get through the pitfalls and get to tremendous success and change the world. And this is the world changing, the world improving business. You guys are in it. I'm privileged to be in business with others as well. But that if you want to predict the future, just go and make it.
We're coming close to time, Bill, but I think it's a very unique opportunity for you to tell us briefly about the Engage program that you're running, which obviously opens up that opportunity for entrepreneurs and corporates to come together and actually invent that future. Do you want to just give a quick picture update on Engage and how people could learn more about it?
I thought I was going to be building clean energy businesses when I finished the book, and because I wanted to make a difference. And I was instead persuaded, and now incredibly glad I joined a venture firm, sort of venture firm. It's a corporate innovation platform, accelerator, all combined together called Engage. 5 years ago, the CEOs of some of the largest companies in the world, Home Depot, UPS, Delta, they got together and said, how do we bring in the incredible innovation that's available in startups? So how do we bring them inside and really embrace them in these giant corporations, which are very resistant to change? Yeah. And Engage was born out of that. And they looked at a lot of things, like they could do government programs and education and all kinds of things. And they decided a venture fund was the way to do it. It's never been done like this before, to my knowledge. At least I've not found it. And the closest thing for the folks that know your industry is Energy Impact Partners, but that's specifically for that industry. But that idea, we do at Engage, smaller scale today. We do a lot of sustainability and clean tech, including you guys. Again, announce a few more soon. But that program allows us to take entrepreneurs and get them in a collaborative partnership fashion with the leaders of these amazing companies. Say, how do we work together? How do we take what VECKTA has and others? I went to dinner last night with the CEO of Lollyware, which converts seaweed to straws and forks, and it's the carbon negative, right?
Awesome.
And we spent the entire day with the top packaging people from Chick-fil-A, Inspire, Home Depot, Delta, Coca-Cola, just getting in a room together. Like, how do we create the market so that everybody wins together? I got to sit in and listen to what was one of the most amazing conversations of my career. And that's what's so cool about what we do. And that's why I'm so excited that you guys are part of that. And I can't wait to have those conversations as that rolls out this fall.
That's great. Cool. If people want to hear more about Engage, where can they find info?
Engage.vc.
Perfect. And we'll close with, if you could have us interview anyone on this podcast, who would it be, why, and what would you ask them?
It's a too standard of an answer, but I'll be honest with you. I think Jigar Shah, who runs the loan program office for the U.S. government out of the Department of Energy, he was on my podcast, and he does a lot of these. But he sits at that apex that we've talked about today of business and government and innovation. And while he's got an amazing giant staff underneath him, he is the face of it. And he, like everyone, like the three of us, there was a million things we could have done, maybe some things that would have made us more money, but we take the roles we are now because the work we're doing can really, really make an impact and maybe improve the future in a way that matters. And he did the same. And I think he is just an incredible inspiration to all of us who come from business and want to be a part of the energy revolution.
Yeah, I love how candid he is. For someone in that role, he speaks very freely, which is much appreciated.
Particularly relevant, Bill. I don't know if you knew this, but Jigar is actually the reason that Gareth and I met. So maybe that's a blessing for us to get him on here.
Yes.
Yeah, we should actually use that story, Dan. So Jigar made a post, Bill, and Dan commented on it. And I was reading through the comments and I was like, these are all pretty garbage. And then I came across Dan's and I liked it. And we LinkedIn dated for over a year before we ended up working together.
I mean, that's the power of, we're talking about Elon Musk. And again, I don't want to over index on him because he's controversial. And boy, I wish he would just stick to like energy. But I think people like Jigar Shah, and hopefully you guys and other really amazing entrepreneurs, the effect you have is so much more than just creating and building a business. And the stories you're telling through your podcast and the other work you're doing, I think that's going to have an impact. Even if it doesn't accrue to your top line necessarily, the world is far better for the journey you're on. And that's what I love about the business you're in. That's great. Any big asks of the community or any takeaway messages you'd like to end on? Well, if you're thinking about getting into the career of your industry, or you're not sure, maybe you should do crypto or something like that. Not that any of your listeners are probably thinking about that, but pick up the Freeing Energy book. We're giving away most of the money we make on it, so there's no pitch here to make myself any money. But I think it really is written, as it says in the beginning. The dedication of the book is to the 10,000 entrepreneurs who have not yet joined the industry but are going to change it. Yeah, I can't speak highly enough of the book. And would encourage everyone to get a copy. Where can people connect with you, Bill, and where can they find your book, podcast? Freeingenergy.com is if you want to talk about energy, that's probably the best place to go. And there's different ways to connect with me in that forum. But that's probably the best way to start. But if you actually have a startup and you're looking in this space or others, just send me an email at bill@engage.vc. That's my startup world. Brilliant. Bill, it has been an absolute pleasure. You are someone we look up to. You're values driven, your passion, your purpose, the way you've managed to integrate your work and your family and your lifestyle, the way you've given away your money to make an impact. These are all super inspirational. Excited to learn a lot more and have more of these conversations, because I think we could all talk for many hours. But thank you for giving up your precious time, and we're excited to collaborate with you. It's an honor. Great to be on a journey with you guys. Likewise. All right. Have a great day. Cheers, everyone.
We receive a lot of questions from business leaders around the world wanting to learn more about the energy transition, what is possible and where to start. So to help you stay informed and up to date on best practices, opportunities, risks and success stories, we created an industry newsfeed at VECKTA.com/news with all our podcasts, blogs and newsletter. Check it out and connect with Dan, myself and the VECKTA team to learn more. Cheers and have a good one.